Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to the lab. My name's Lou Fullenkamp, and today we're going to be diving into one of my favorite topics, and that is autoregulation. So, on top of what we're going to be talking about today with autoregulation, I'm also going to be bringing up a new topic here today, and that's flexible nonlinear programming. All right, so this can be used to create a smarter, more adaptable way to train. It's awesome. Now, this is important because whether if you're a coach, an athlete, maybe you're a physical therapist in the rehab world, understanding these concepts can help you with basically, I guess, how you approach programming, recovery, and then also performance. Kind of seeing with auto regulation types of training, you know, we're not, I guess, let me preface it this way. We are not always going to be at 100%, right? There's life stressors. I mean, your body doesn't really care what it says on the training day calendar for that day. It's going to be hard if you have to move 85% and you slept like absolute crap, or maybe you haven't been able to get in as much food as possible because of work schedules, school schedules. It's just hard. It's hard. So that's why today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be breaking down what auto regulation training actually means, what flexible nonlinear programming looks like in practice, and then we're also going to look at how maybe you can combine or how you can build a program that allows you to adapt as an athlete, whereas usually the athlete has to adapt to the program adapts to the athlete with this kind of a program setup. To begin, let's start with autoregulation training. Now, first and foremost, nonlinear programming is a form of autoregulatory programming, but not all autoregulatory programs are basically flexible nonlinear programming, if that makes sense, guys. So, to begin with, autoregulation training is basically adjusting the load, volume, or even your exercises based on your readiness for that day. And that can be done through, let's see here, a number of different tools, right? So the big four that I like to use would be an RPE number, right? So like what's the rate of perceived exertion? The RIR or reps in reserve, we'll talk a little bit more about that. You can use velocity-based training. And then also, if you wanted to, you can use a readiness or a wellness score. So think about like the Whoop, right? I actually think the Whoop is probably one of the better examples for this because when you first wake up, it'll give you that how recovered score you truly are and how basically are you ready to handle the stimulus for today. So to start, let's just kind of rehash a little bit more. RPE. Most people have probably heard of this, usually a scale of 1 to 10. In lifting, you can also use a modified version as well, where it's like more like the Borg scale. But just for simplicity, right? A 10 in an RPE would be absolute max effort. There's no reps left in the tank, whereas an RPE of 7, maybe you have like 3 reps left in the tank, and like that's how you can gauge it. So you guys can kind of see like with that, it can let you adjust intensity, but without necessarily being like absolutely set on your percentages. Maybe you were supposed to hit 85%, but let's say you got to 65% and you already had an RP of 10. Sometimes that happens. We sleep, we maybe don't drink enough, or maybe we have a lot of stress going on at work. It happens. All right. So I might have 3 by 5 at 80% for one day, but if I come in and maybe it's not feeling that great, I could reduce the load that I'm going to be using for those training sets that day based off how I'm feeling. Now, I have a little bit of a hang up with the RPE being more of a subjective scale, but at the same time, I mean, your body's talking to you, so listen to it, make adjustments. Now, reps in reserve is going to work the same way, it's just kind of flipped. So if you're doing a set and you feel like you could do 2 more reps before failure, that would be a 2 in the reps in reserve. I'll put up the scale so you guys can kind of see how those would kind of look. Now, for velocity-based training, that's where you're actually tracking bar speed, and it's more of an objective measure, which is kind of what I like more. Kind of like when Whoop gives you an actual number that shows how basically recovered you truly are. This is going to give you more of an insight into how fast you're moving, and then maybe how primed your nervous system is, or how fatigued your nervous system is. Now, there's a few different devices. I know there's GymAware has one, VMAX Pro. There's a few different ones. I'll put up one if I need to. But usually, let's say your squat's moving at zero point 0.6 meters per second, and then that's at 85%. But let's say you feel like absolute dog crap today. Maybe you just got off of a cold or something, and now it's only crawling at zero point 0.4 meters per second. You probably don't have, all the gas in the tank for that day, so you ain't gonna go into hot, like basically your top gear. Um, and then kind of like what I've already been talking about with the whoop scoring, you can get a sleep score. You can gauge how sore you feel based on just going down the stairs sometimes after a leg day, and then, maybe 48 hours later. Um, how stressed are you being at work? I know sometimes when I'm at work and then I'm thinking about training later that day, sometimes it is more of a chore, but we got to get it done. So it's not necessarily as objective unless you have a physical, actual gauge for it. But that is huge, huge when you have an athlete or you have someone who's going through rehab, because then you can kind of make you adjust on what you're going to be doing with that patient for that day. So why does all of this matter? I guess you could look at it this way. So, because training itself is a stressor, the rest of your life all adds into what your body can tolerate exercise volume wise. So, that's why we always harp on sleep, nutrition, work stress. We got to look into all of those different aspects because you only have one cup to pull from, or there's only one battery for you to pull from, and that's basically going to allow you to train and get the most out of your training. So why wouldn't you want to train smarter and not harder? And that's where auto-regulation lets you basically take into account for that. So let's do a little bit of a shift. So that's auto-regulatory programming, right? Now, for flexible nonlinear programming, you guys have probably already heard of linear periodization, right? Where the volume decreases as the intensity rises. So, or block periodization, where you're working on one specific quality over a period of time before you would basically shift um, the form of training or what your attribute you're trying to emphasize through the training. So, flexible nonlinear programming basically says, why can't you rotate what you do based off how ready the person is? So the the background of this is that the plan should fit the athlete, not the athlete fitting the plan. In a traditional nonlinear setup, you might hit heavy, moderate, and light days within a week. So maybe one day you're hitting, a high intensity. Maybe on Wednesday you're hitting a dynamic day, and then maybe on Friday you're just trying to build a little bit more volume with some of the repetitions. However, as we know, maybe job got in the way, or maybe you had little ones and, maybe your sleep is absolutely abysmal. Um, there's a whole hodgepodge of different things that could maybe take away from your readiness to be trained or to train. And that's why flexible nonlinear programming allows you to swap out, delay, or maybe even adjust the days based on your readiness. So let's say Monday was supposed to be really heavy squats, but you come in maybe with like you know, a 5 out of 10 on your readiness score. Maybe you're at like a 45% recovery rate on your whoop. Maybe, heck, that'll be fine. You can shift that to a different type of training session in order to maintain stimulus, but without, completely draining the battery. So you could stay with squats, but maybe you use a much lighter load than what you before, like what you had planned to do. Maybe you were supposed to hit a specific velocity. Maybe you do need to reduce the loads and then maintain that velocity. So this is great for, in-season athletes, maybe high stress training environments. The rehab setting is actually wonderful for this. And then honestly, any person or adult that has, a very intense job, has kids, and as we all have, life stresses. So how does auto-regulatory programming and flexible nonlinear programming go together? Well, they're actually very complementary because they're very similar and they go hand in hand. So with flexible nonlinear programming, it kind of gives you the framework, and then you'll have like your set training days, maybe with different objectives, but then the auto-regulation gives you the in-session tools, basically to make adjustments. So for example, again, here's another one. Let's say your week is I got to do heavy back squats, or let's say a heavy deadlift on Monday. I've got, a lot of quick movements with good mornings on Wednesday. I've got a max strict press or maybe a box squat or something on Friday. And then I've got Saturday is just, just volume. Just hammer out the hamstrings, hammer out the mid upper back, whatever it is. I come in on Monday, my game plan is a 3 rep max on deadlift. And I'm going through my warm-up sets and they feel absolutely terrible. All right, let's say my bar speed is really down. I only got 4 hours of sleep. Um, I'm basically trying to, if I were to keep on with this current plan, I'd be trying to force a 3 rep max. But with the auto-regulatory type of mindset or plan, I should say, I've got maybe I could come up with 3 different options. So if I'm feeling really crummy, I only got 4 hours of sleep, option A would maybe to shift to a volume deadlift, maybe at 70% or an RPE of 7. I could do option B, move the max effort to Wednesday and then swap in something different, maybe like high repetition deadlifts, or maybe I work at a lower load and try to hit the same 3 rep, but I just maybe hit that for multiple sets. And then C would be just replace the barbell pull with maybe a heavy kettlebell swing, maybe a posterior chain exercise or accessory, something that still hits the same muscle group, but maybe at this not at the same intensity. So that's kind of getting into more of like the autoregulatory, flexible, nonlinear, uh, hand in hand right there. So would the outcomes with this typically be better? In the rehab setting, this is honestly what I love to do to begin with. Because if someone comes in and, let's say Grandma Jones, who I had already planned on working on picking up laundry baskets from the floor, comes in and she's like, we had a birthday party and I had to stand and cook all day and I had to stand and bake a cake and now my lower back is really tired, it's sore, it's achy, and I don't know if we can do today. So I've got to pivot. And now I've got to come up with a different plan. So Grandma Jones is telling me that I can't do this task today. I feel like this. I'm happy at the fact that she was able to do those tasks for her granddaughter. However, now I'm coming up with a new plan in my head that still is going to emphasize those same basically attributes I need to hit with Grandma Jones, but then I also don't overdo it with her at the same time and we still continue to move forward. So that's why sometimes the outcomes with this can be better because even though we've had to pivot, Grandma Jones is still making progress and we can still emphasize the point that I needed to get with it on that day. So we can basically avoid some poor quality in what maybe I had originally planned, and I can get more efficiency to my programming and maybe with less intensity. So it reduces your chance for, aggravating those areas, but it also maybe will help Grandma Jones realizing, oh, even though I feel sore, I can still do things in this state. So kind of moving into the next one. Let's say my game plan was to do 5 by 3 on back squats at 85%. But after set two, right, my RPE was hitting me about like a 7 for the first 2 sets. But after set two, I'm already at like an RPE of 9. And let's just say I'm not going to hit those 3 repetitions in the remaining sets. So would I just stop right there in my back squats? No, I could reduce load and then I could kind of, drop the ego a little bit and I could try to get good quality repetitions while trying to maintain my effort levels. Maybe trying to maintain my RPE between like the 7 and maybe an 8, but not completely just ditching on my sets because I'm already hitting the wall at set 2. That's also where it could be really beneficial to have a coach or just an outside eye, someone that can watch you do the movements and see if maybe you're not being honest with yourself and they need to make the adjustment for you. Alex Trotter would probably call it the coach's eye. Being able to see how that kid's moving for that day and take away whatever load they were planning to use with them and then go into something that they're actually going to benefit from. So if I'm looking at this, um, I guess how are you going to apply this to your programming tomorrow? So one of my go-tos with this could be there's a few different ways that we can track this. So tracking your readiness. So what's your sleep like? What's your stress, soreness? Um, Maybe you do need to take a look into what is your resting heart rate and see how actually prepared is your nervous system for stimulus, or how basically ready is your body to handle the stressors of training on top of what else is going on in life. So you can use those tracking of the readiness scores, and that'll that's usually step one. Two would be, is your program going to be flexible throughout the week? So if you do, let's say you need to have a heavy day, a speed day, a volume day, but you should be able to swap in and out based off your readiness. Now, what you don't want to do is be like, okay, I feel like crap today, and then you go doing back-to-back heavy days unless you actually feel like you could do that based off your readiness score, but it's going to be hard. Usually, when you have a heavy day, very huge neural stimulus, your body's going to take up to 24, 48 hours, sometimes as long as 72, just to recover. So, we want to be smart with our program and not just put people in the ground. Just because you're tired doesn't mean it was effective. So then we also need to be really honest with ourselves, and this is where sometimes having the coach as well would be beneficial, but being able to use like an RPE or a reps in reserve to kind of help with the auto-regulatory aspect of session loads. So if like, let's say you're not absolutely set on these percentages anymore, you can basically modify based off how that athlete is feeling or how your patient's feeling, which is great because then even though they might not feel as great that they're hitting the prescribed percentages, they're still going to be making progress. And down the road, when we start getting the building blocks kind of in place, they'll have ways that they can make progress without absolutely torturing themselves. If you do have access to velocity-based training, so something that can track bar speed, you'll be able to kind of see anything where there's a loss of about 10% on velocity. So if you're losing that, and if you're trying to do power work and you're losing the speed, you're losing the entire point of your exercise session to begin with. And then obviously, if you're trying to do particular, your goal is to be an Olympic weightlifter, and you're moving absolutely snail's pace that day. Maybe that's not the load you need to be working with, and maybe we do need to address what's your volume like for the week, or whatever has led to this drop in speed. So this is where sometimes if you're OCD like myself, it can be hard to change. Basically, having a set plan and having a pathway or a blueprint is wonderful to have, and I like having that to move through the week. But I think that even though that's like what the plan is, it's okay to change that as long as you're still making progress. I mean, if you're like, oh yeah, I totally feel like it's an RPE of 9. I don't feel like I could hit 85% today. And then you're flying with 75 or 65%. Like that's one aspect where you probably weren't honest, and we maybe need to be a little bit harder on that. So the plan is there. You have the guideline of the readiness score, and it allows you to make more efficient and smart changes to your programming. So to wrap this kind of up, the best program is one that adapts to the athlete and how ready they are. So autoregulation is basically your in-session adjustment tool. And then the flexible nonlinear programming aspect of this is basically just the big picture framework that basically allows you for more room to make adjustments, especially with all the wonderful life chaos that comes with growing older as an athlete, but it allows you to keep making progress. And you don't have to be married to a particular, set of boundaries within the program then. I should say percentages. So if you combine this efficiently and you have a system that's both responsive, builds resilience, and then also um, allows you to continue building in the long haul, and you're constantly making and hitting milestones, this is wonderful. The other aspect of this is that if you're in the clinic setting, this helps you coming up with, plan A, B, and C based off that subjective report when you get from your patient when they walk in the door. And that's why sometimes when they walk in, you're like, "Hey, how you doing today?" And they tell you, "Oh, I'm fine." Dig a little deeper, find out what fine actually means. Maybe they're still really sore, maybe they're tired, maybe they haven't had the greatest of days, maybe work is really stressful. But we need to get more of an insight to how they're truly feeling. 'Cause not everyone's going to have a Whoop, no one's going to have an Apple, not as many people are going to have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit. Sometimes we need to dig a little bit more deeper, have a conversation with them. They're a human being. We want to find out so that what you have planned for them is going to allow for them to make progress within your plan of care. So that's just one of the better ways to do it. But I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Please, 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 guys, don't forget to share the episodes. Hit the subscribe button whenever you're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and then please leave a review also on Spotify. That kind of helps us with getting found and also helps us with spreading the name of the Lab Collective. And I really do appreciate those of you who are new followers. I really appreciate you guys the messages that have just been awesome. So I appreciate that and looking forward to continuing to grow this platform and with what we can to help people. And, as Alex Gale would put it, helping people help people. So to all of you out there, if you have any questions on how to implement this, maybe if you want to talk, feel free to go to my Instagram, or if you want to, shoot me an email. But thanks for hanging out with me, guys. Get out there and start training smarter. Have a good one.